Before we stretch our hamstrings today, I want to talk about where those muscles attach and what motions are going to get you the most out of your hamstring stretch. So we have our little friend Reginald here, and he's going to help us identify our hamstrings. Now, if you wiggle back and forth in your seat, you might feel the bony part of your butt, if you've ever been told you have a bony butt before. And those are your sit bones or your ischial tuberosities. Now, on your skeleton, what that looks like is the very bottom part of your hip here. And that is where your hamstring muscles attach, most of them at least. And then as well down below the knee. So they allow the knee to bend, they also extend the hip. Now, if you're standing up straight and bending forward to touch your toes, this is generally how most people are going to stretch their hamstrings. But what we see a lot of is rounding in the back. And he's not quite flexible enough to do this. But if you are bending forward and a lot of that bend is coming from a rounding in the spine, you're really not getting as much hamstring stretch. You're lengthening these muscles in the low back in a really unstable way, by the way, and we'll get to that later. So what we want to do, instead of bending at the waist in between the rib cage and the hips, we want to bend at the hip joint, maintaining a straight spine as we go forward. And what that does is brings the hips forward, and the ischial tuberosities or the sit bones then come up. And that lengthens the muscles there in the back of the leg, not only up the thigh, but also in the lower leg and your calf muscles. Keep that in mind as we're going through hamstring stretches of keeping the sit bones pointing back, the hips almost tipped forward, and maintaining a straight spine.
Begin standing on your mat with your feet about 3 or 4 inches apart, parallel to each other. Now remember, it's just as much about the angle of your hips as it is how straight your legs are. Inhale, bring your arms up and overhead. Exhale, swan dive towards the floor, keeping your feet grounded and in place. And here you can let your body hang. If you want to pull yourself closer to your legs, you can reach back and grab your ankles. And on our inhale, make sure that we're rising up with a flat back as well. That keeps the back muscles activated and engaged. This time we're going to add a halfway lift. Inhale, arms up overhead. Exhale, forward fold towards the floor. Inhale, lift halfway with a flat back. Exhale, try and keep that flat back moving into your forward fold again. Little micro bend in the knees, but legs as straight as they're willing to go. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, release the arms. Now, the less common way to stretch out the hamstrings is starting in more of a crouched position. So widen up your stance, and then I even point my toes just a little bit outwards, knowing that my knees are going to bend. I want my knees in the same directions as my toes. Find a comfortable crouched position where you can put your hands flat on the floor in front of your feet. Think about bringing those sit bones up towards the sky. The front part of your body pitch towards the floor, and slowly, gradually straightening our legs. Sit bones high up in the air. As your legs straighten, you can bring the feet back to parallel and even step them in gradually. Just make sure that you're not losing that stretch in the hamstrings. Legs as straight as they're willing to go today. When we're ready, Rise up on your inhale. Exhale, release the arms. And we'll move into a more dynamic stretch for the hamstrings. So I do like to put a blanket down for my knee. I also grab my blocks to give myself a little bit of room in the front. So come down to your knees, step the right foot forward, and bring the blocks in so they're a comfortable distance between your hips and your front foot. Now your stance should be wide enough that you can get a stretch, but not so wide that your hips are no longer in alignment. You want your hips to be parallel to the front edge of your mat. So on your inhale, start in the forward low lunge. Exhale, the hips shift straight back, front leg straightens. Inhale, shift forward to the low lunge. Exhale, the hips move back, just moving with your breath. And you can point and flex the front foot as you move in and out of the stretch. Last time, as the hips come back, we're going to stay in that half split. Point and flex the front foot. You can even sit your hips from one side to the other. Feel where you feel more of that stretch in the hamstrings. Stretching those inner and outer hamstring muscles. On your inhale, the hips shift forward to the low lunge. You can bring your blocks forward if you need to support yourself. And back as straight as it can stay. Move the blocks out of the way. Step back to table pose. You can sink back into child's pose for a moment. And as we come up, bring the left foot forward, right knee stays back, and set your blocks. Find a good stance for you. It doesn't have to be the same distance from one side to the next. And then take a brief moment to settle into that low lunge. Inhale, we lengthen through the spine. Exhale, the hips shift backwards, half split. Inhale back to the low lunge. Exhale, shift back into the half split, moving with your breath. What differences do you feel moving from one side to the next? Do your hips move smoothly? Or do you feel they want to twist as you move in and out of the stretch? This time we'll keep the hips back, finding that stretch in your hamstring. And still use the blocks to support yourself, keeping your upper body nice and tall and long. Inhale, shift forward to the low lunge and hold. This is a great stretch for a number of muscles. Unfortunately, your psoas is not one of them, as people often like to claim. Your psoas, being more of a postural muscle, actually does not release in an upright position. On your next inhale, lengthen through the spine, move the blocks out of the way. Exhale, bring your hands down to the floor, step back to table pose. Take a moment to find your center. Toes tuck under. Exhale, press your hips back into downward facing dog pose. Legs straight, back straight, chest sinks. Make sure to keep your neck in a straight line as well. Inhale forward to plank. Exhale chaturanga, lowering to the floor. Inhale little baby cobra. Exhale, release back to the floor. Whenever you're ready, whenever you have to, make your way back up off your mat and carry on.